Hey everybody, Scott Carson, founder and CEO of Powered by MRP and also host of MedTech Marketplace. About a year ago, I met Sara through a mutual acquaintance, and many of you know Sara. She is the author of MedSpa Confidential, the #1 bestseller in aesthetics on Amazon. She is a lawyer, and she started her law practice specifically focused on the MedSpa community in 2019. And that's about the time, I guess we met a little bit after that. But today she has 19 lawyers in a firm representing 1,000 plus med spas around the US. And she's here in Park City. We just did a quick tour of the place, showed her around. And I thought today'd be fun just to kind of find out, Sara, what's happening in med spa, what's exciting, what are you bumping into, what's the #1 drama issue that you're seeing today that has a legal spin to it?
I can't believe we went straight to the drama. Well, first of all, it's great to be here and
Thanks.
to do this in person. It's so fun in this connected world that we live in to actually do something in person once in a while, although technology is awesome too. I think the #1 thing that I'm seeing is people getting investigated because they are reporting each other. So what happens is someone opens up a new practice, it becomes successful, their #1 competitor files an anonymous complaint, and the next thing you know, there's a investigator who comes without an appointment and says, hey, my name is Mary, we're investigating you for not having the proper good faith exam procedure. Show us all your documentation and your charts and open up the practice to me so I could find other things wrong with it too.
This is such a real issue. It's interesting that a little less than a week ago, one of my very dear friends who's a Mohs surgeon, dermatologist, that I helped kind of get his practice started 4 years ago with some equipment, and his practice has just exploded and doing really well. And he had an employee file a complaint, basically as retaliation for being terminated and for theft. And that turned into basically a full-blown investigation of his practice, which ultimately was benign, but it's incredibly frightening. And I imagine that that's what your clients are facing.
Yeah, it's incredibly frightening. It's very surprising. It always comes at the wrong time, and it doesn't really have like a fixed end or deadlines or any transparency. Because these things are run by administrative agencies, they have their own set of laws that they have to follow, but a lot of it is left up to the investigator, and it could take months to years. So it's not like something that usually is completed in like a week or a month, even if you were doing everything correctly. Once it starts, could be a year or two, and then what's happening is the boards all work together in a particular state. So if the nursing board comes in and they see that you're doing, let's say, hydrofacial, then they're like, well, maybe let's call the cosmetology board and see if they find anything, because I didn't like this person. Not to say that they make it personal, but sometimes if they see that someone's unprepared, they don't have the right paperwork, they feel like, well, maybe they don't have the right paperwork for everything, and all of a sudden it becomes like everything that you're thinking about as a practice owner for the next year.
So this sounds more like a competitive weapon that competition is using to minimize, destroy the brand, the reputation, displace employees more than anything, than maybe a real valid issue.
For sure, for sure. So when I was working for a practice, I was the general counsel, and a few people knew that I was going away to a conference. And the very day that I started, and I was speaking at this conference, and like the same day that I was speaking, 2 minutes after I finished the talk, I got a call that said, oh, there's an investigation at the office. And I was like, how is this possible? How is it, this timing is so crazy? But I think a lot of it is this way to, I don't know, like an anti-competitive behavior, because there are these bigger practices that are very entrenched, very traditional, and they're like, oh, there's this new practice. I don't like this. Let me see if I could call this place on them.
I talk to, as you know, at least 1 or 2 new practices a day within dermatology, med spa, plastic surgery, looking for guidance on how they can start their practice. And almost in every single phone call, I advise them to do nothing, go slow. And one of the reasons I mentioned that is you have no idea what your competition is going to do. And a lot of times these clinicians will load up with equipment, massive amounts of lease payments. They go to one of these weekend seminars put on one of the big manufacturers. They walk away where their credit card's been hit for $30,000. They now have $300,000 or $400,000 in equipment commitments. They have $20,000, $30,000 a month in lease payments, and they're opening up, and they don't realize their competition can be formidable. And they can do things like this. They can make it very difficult to succeed. And it sounds very much like I should add this to my explanation, that you're going to see some fierce behavior from the marketplace. And it sounds like if this is the number one thing that is coming to mind that you're seeing, that it's pretty significant.
Yeah, definitely. I think it happens to most people, actually, over time. I would say within the first 2 years of practice, it happens to almost everyone who's successful. So one way to put a positive spin on it is what I tell my clients. I'm like, okay, think about it as a way of, this is a sign of you being successful enough that these big guys are probably reporting you. Mm-hmm. So if you were too small for them to care about, they wouldn't say anything. So you just have to expect that it's going to happen and have procedures in place to protect yourself in case it does happen. So it's not office ending or license ending if it happens. We've had situations like somebody came to us from another lawyer, and they were like, I have a letter here that says my license is going to be suspended for a year starting from, let's say, May 1st. And I'm like, what do you mean you have a letter? Like, what did you do that your license is going to be suspended? That's a super serious thing. And they're like, well, I was accused of this and this and this. And the best thing my previous place was able to do is get me this letter that my license is going to be suspended. And I'm super stressed out because this is my livelihood. I can't do anything else. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is unacceptable. Like, this is not a good outcome. What you were doing was like pretty minor. We need to talk to the investigator and find a way to settle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think there are ways to settle all these things, but they just take time and like a law firm that knows what they're doing. But they're fixable, and they are, most of them end up with someone not losing their license. They may get a public or private reprimand, and life goes on. But they're fixable. They're just very stressful.
When I was very young in business, and keep in mind I've been in business for now almost 40 years, and during my early to mid-20s and early 30s, you kind of feel like you know everything. You're the smartest person on the planet. And I started to have some stress points, and there was this attorney that was a good friend of mine. His name was Glenn, and I was always admiring these business people that had incredible stress, but they never seemed to have like any emotion that you could see. Mm-hmm. And I asked him one day, how do they do that? And before I answer, or I share what his answer was, when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you do think you know it all. When you get in your 40s in business, you kind of realize, well, maybe there's some things I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then you get into your 50s and you realize, hey, wait a sec, I don't really know much. And then when you get to be now, I'm 60, I've realized I don't really know anything. But this is one of the great things that I know to be true. And that is time is your ally. Mm-hmm. Time is your ally. And you don't need to react to these things all the time. And not to get emotional, because it does take time to play out. And there's nothing you can do to accelerate it, because it's administrative. As you said, it's governmental. And they don't operate at the same time frame that founders do and entrepreneurs do and business owners. We try to get things done immediately. And the last thing I'll say on that before you kind of comment on that is, a lot of the world, especially governments, work on a 24-hour clock. And we work on a, basically minute by minute, moment by moment, instantaneous clock of the internet and emails and information. So we operate one way, but the administrative world operates in a different way. And I imagine that you're seeing a lot of that. It just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and it's a process you have to say, okay, like, it's not going to be resolved in a week, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It means that I just have to relax, business as usual, reassure my staff everything is fine, and continue doing what I'm doing, and have faith in your professional team that they're going to handle it for you.
I love the fact that you said that really it's it's one of the badges you get, merit badges, for achieving a certain level of success. If you weren't meaningful and you weren't threatening, they were never going to bother you.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And the same thing, like, when you're using Instagram and you post your before and afters and they're awesome. Sometimes you may get some hater comments, right? But it's a badge of success that these people are noticing your work, and they may say something negative, but at the end of the day, like, if you were a nobody, if you had 2 Instagram followers, like you wouldn't get these people. So yeah, it's like a rite of passage. It's going to happen to you and you have to move on. It's kind of easier to get over some of these things than if you spend $1 million on lasers and you have this ironclad contract with one of the manufacturers. It's harder to get at from one of those than it is to ward off a triple board investigation.
That's interesting. I would agree with that. Is the agreements with leasing companies and manufacturers are not fungible. They're incredibly tight and almost impossible to break in any way, as you well know. So what's the second most interesting thing that you're bumping into now with the group that you're seeing, you're getting calls about, or you're trying to resolve?
It has to do with equipment, actually. So what happens with equipment sometimes is one party buys it, and then another party is using it, and maybe they get into a fight, or maybe they signed a contract that they really didn't read, and it was in tiny, tiny font, and then they say, well, we are trying to get out of this, and actually, like, I paid for this, but this other person's using it, and can I get it? Can I move it out of the practice? And things related to that. So kind of fighting either with equipment companies or with people, with each other around this big equipment, and while the equipment is sitting there, collecting dust.
A few months ago, I was at a trade show and I met this physician, and she was having difficulties with her partner. And I said, well, explain your partnership to me. She goes, well, she owns the practice and I went to work there, but we're partners. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? She goes, well, she bought the equipment and I get to use it, and we have this share thing that seems unfair to me. And I said, okay, well, do you have an agreement? And she goes, yeah, we have an agreement. And I said, do you have it handy? She goes, well, I do. And I said, do you remember what it said? She goes, no, I didn't read it. I said, let me see if I got this right. You're a physician. You spent 20 years going to school. You went to work for another physician. Your partners, and it turns out she had the agreement drafted, the owner physician, and you didn't read it. And she goes, no. I said, okay, can I get a copy of it? And so she ended up sending it to me several weeks later. And I looked at it, and it was so unenforceable. It's in California, like so unenforceable. Even I'm not a lawyer, but I could tell that there's no way you could enforce it. So, because you just can't. And so that was the way that she moved forward. Is it was an unenforceable agreement that obviously had no representation. But it's surprising to me that in this industry, people run into these agreements without just in complete trust. And I imagine you're seeing just a tremendous amount of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think we get a lot of calls from new practices, and a lot of times it's a partnership or people want to partner. And we have a partnership. Before we tell people, yes, we think it's a good idea for you to partner, here's a contract, we have a partnership questionnaire. And it talks about, okay, what's your long-term vision for this business? How much capital do each of you have? Like, what are you looking to do? And a lot of times through that questionnaire, people are like, oh no, like, I don't want to partner with this person. They only have like $100 and their credit score is, 600 and mine is, 800. So I think like these partnerships, well, no one taught most people in school about partnerships. Like there's no partnerships class in medical school or nursing school. And being in a partnership is like getting married to someone. And like, why would you get married to someone before dating them? Like that is a bad idea. And so, I'm not a divorce lawyer, but having experienced divorce, I'm like, I don't want to be part of your divorce. I want to be part of your successful marriage. For you to have the successful partnership marriage, let's do the pre-work and think about what you guys want and then put it all on paper and give you a fair partnership agreement for both of you. But it's hard. I mean, people get excited. They want to do things together. Like someone may call me and say, we have this great idea, can you help me launch it? I'm like, yeah, great. Okay, let's start tomorrow. That's not great.
I'm not sure this is a term in the legal world, but it sounds like instead of a partnership agreement, what we need is a prenup agreement, a pre-partnership agreement, in which we set the terms of the breakup early on, so everybody knows what the rules are going into the partnership. Is that kind of what you're leaning towards?
Yeah, definitely.
Did I make that up?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think I'm going to start using that. Like I'm going to say, we're going to draft your partnership prenup.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like a thing? A partnership prenup?
I think people need that, especially in this industry. And a lot of people who are different professions are trying to partner. And it's hard because, first of all, there are laws in many states that, like, where, let's say, an RN can't partner with an NP, even though it sounds like they should be able to, but they can't. Or a business person can't partner with an MD. So then we get into these much more complicated arrangements, like MSOs and MSAs and lots of legal different jargon. But what happens is you get into this very complicated partnership with someone, and then when it comes time to break it up, all these questions come up, like who owns the patients and who owns the equipment and who's going to continue on the office lease. So yeah, I think it's much better for people to start slow, even with their partnership, and say, why don't we first just start working together, like in a small way, and see how we like each other, like in a work way. Working together, as I'm sure you know, brings out sometimes the worst in people under business pressure. So why not experience that together before we really get business married,
What people don't realize, well, when I think about this space, there's just always a running, like the sprint to get going. And what I often tell people is there's no hair removal emergency. There's not one, never been one, never going to be one. There might be like a little one, but there's not like a really big thing. And you really need to slow down and really take your time. And and how I describe that to people to get them to slow down is there's all kinds of data out there right now suggesting how big this market is going to be for how long. And you and I have talked about some of this before, but Allergan predicts that we'll be 10,000 injectors short per year for the next 10 years. I read recently that male skincare is up 468% in the under 30 category in the first 6 months of 23. I was told by a mutual friend of ours that in Arizona alone in 2023, there were 1,500 new med spas. The amount of opportunity you see the convergence of 1/7 of the world's wealth living inside the US and baby boomers, all getting ready to have the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of anything. And they all need to want and look younger and feel younger, and they're going to spend money in our space. You see youth focused on prejuvenation. So really, there's no reason to rush. If you walk into this, your chances of success, if you execute properly, are very, very high. Is that something you're seeing?
Definitely, 100%. Even if you're asleep at the wheel and you're just doing the bare minimum, most likely your practice will grow like 10 to 15%, which in any other industry is crazy, right? But in this industry, that's pretty standard. And yeah, I mean, there are all these people who used to be just considerers are now becoming customers, and there's so much more awareness from men, from younger people, from older people. Like it's like becoming like getting a haircut. It's just like the regular thing. Like everyone's getting hair removal, everyone's getting Botox, everyone's getting semaglutide. So I think we're just getting started. There's so much opportunity. There's no need to rush.
As I share with people, we're not even in the first pitch of the first inning. This is so big, so new, so fresh. But since it's been around for 30 years in some form, it's really taken 30 years to get to this place where you have the intersection of opportunity and technology and education to make it work. So I agree with you. We've covered a couple of things. And the number one thing that you're seeing right now is that the tattling from practices in the community towards emerging practices. And those are becoming significant regulatory issues and legal issues for your clients. And to basically take a deep breath and ride out the storm. And in the end, it's probably not that big of a deal. Second thing is that as it relates to going slow, coupled with agreements, is to really be thoughtful before you enter into partnerships. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Send everything to you before you sign anything.
Please.
Anything. Doesn't matter what it is.
It's so much cheaper to review something before it's signed because you have the opportunity to negotiate, and it's so much more flexible. If I'm trying to fix the deal you already made, but everything is already signed, it's so hard. I'm a lawyer, not a magician, right? So that's what I say to people.
By the way, everyone, I have been negotiating with somebody where Sara is in the background, and it's not fun. It's not fun. They become very formidable to work with because they're so well educated and they know what questions to ask. And honestly, for us, it's a benefit because we get a lot of those things out of the way that they wouldn't be thinking otherwise, that maybe a month or 6 months later, like, hey, I didn't think about this and I feel a little mistreated because I didn't understand or I didn't know. You get those things out of the way. So for us, it's actually a benefit. I'm just giving you a hard time. So what's the third thing that you're kind of seeing, that you're kind of bumping into, maybe something a little more spicy and something that's kind of interesting in the community?
Yeah, I think another thing that I'm seeing is there are a lot of new products. It used to be where, there was like Botox and Dysport and the other people. And now there are so many other things, right? And it's the same thing with fillers. And so what's happening is there isn't this dominance by the major players as there was, so which means there's more competition. And so people are starting with a lot of other new products, and there are a lot of new indications. So there's a lot more you can do, and there's a lot more for a customer that people are able to do. So what's happening is there are people who are really capitalizing on some of these new market entrants and these new indications. And so before, where you were able just to sell, like, let's say, one area of Botox to someone and that's it. Now people are doing all these new fillers, all these new neurotoxins, and the average order amount is going up. At least that's what we see. So it's interesting because people are coming in for more stuff with IV hydration and semaglutide and all these laser treatments that they didn't think of. And then also they are getting more different types of fillers. So that's been interesting. Like, just the new lasers, new neurotoxins. I think there's just a lot more opportunity. Like, I think of it as like if you went to CVS and there was only 3 products, like, you would get bored after a while. But if you go to CVS and they have so many different drugs and so many different vitamins, and that's what's happening at med spas. There are just lots and lots of new technologies, and people are looking younger and better, and they're getting more addicted to this feeling. And so I think that's fueling the growth too. Like, everyone is aware of what laser hair removal and Botox is, but also there's 10 new Botoxes and 10 new different types of laser hair removal, and it's less painful.
There's an underlying theme in what you just shared. Is, on one hand, it's incredibly exciting that we have so much choice and so much evolution in the products and services that are coming our way. But you and I also know that there's a very dark underbelly. And I'll give you an example of there's so much competition in the space. I talk about this a lot right now, is that technology is moving so fast that government regulatory cannot keep up and will never keep up. And with the devices getting smarter, machines learning, and artificial intelligence that we're just on the beginning of, that we're starting to see, and devices starting to learn, something that we're on the forefront of developing and working on as it relates to customer experience. What people don't realize is the governmental regulatory can't keep up. And we know right now in our space, there are devices being sold without FDA clearance, being sold to clinicians and treating patients. And it's only a matter of time before there's a significant adverse event. And that adverse event is going to pierce through all types of things, because the clinician didn't take the time to find out the legitimacy of the product, and because they trusted the rep or they trusted the company. And what I think people might want to hear is, in all of these, this giant menu that's creating, the liability is really with the clinician. It's not with the manufacturer, it's not with the sales rep. And how are you starting to see that evolve?
Yeah, so it's interesting because people sometimes think if they're going to buy from Acme company, that somehow if there's an adverse event, Acme is going to protect them. Well, the bad news is no. They may have you talk to their medical science liaison, who's going to say it's not our fault, and that's it. But the liability will be on you, 100%. They're not going to do anything for you. They're not going to pay for your legal fees, none of that. So what's happening is people are buying all these random devices, like from Alibaba or some weird places, and then they send us, they're like, oh, I bought this thing from whatever. Can you help me write the policies and procedures of how to perform it? I'm like, what is that thing? I've never heard of it. Do they have they been FDA cleared? And what happens is, if you're buying from this place and something happens, First of all, your insurance may not cover it at all because your insurance will have like a little line and it's saying if your device is not FDA cleared, this policy is not applicable. And maybe you didn't even read that line in your policy. And second of all, like you'll have a lot of liability saying you made a bad medical judgment even using this device, that you shouldn't have even used it on anyone. So yeah, I think the regulations have really not kept up. And the regulations in a lot of states, in more specific, like giving you an example, don't mention these devices. So just because a regulation doesn't say that, let's say a nurse practitioner can do CO2, doesn't mean that she can or she can't. You can't just make a conclusion based on it being in the regulation or not. So it's kind of like the Wild West in that way. Like there are all these new products, they may not be FDA cleared, someone is gonna get hurt, then more regulations will happen. The sad part is, like we saw in Texas, if someone dies from these treatments, everyone is going to get blamed, and there'll be a lot more scrutiny in the whole industry. So it's really important for all of us to try to use the best devices we can, to do as much homework as we can, so that we protect the whole industry. Because even if it's not me and you who are operating the bad device, it's going to be really bad if someone dies from some laser treatment, and then the government will look and say, like, what is this? But yeah, it's kind of like a crazy time. Like you see this explosive business growth, and then the regulations are like 20 years behind. So it's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, there's so many things I could share with people on that. One of them is what people don't realize is manufacturers have product liability insurance, and MRP has significant product liability insurance. But I would tell you that 90 to 95% of the resellers of new and used in the RES do not have proper product liability insurance, so you're basically relying on the manufacturer, which you sign something in your agreement. It typically says for the most part you're on your own. So I don't think people realize that. You've now been to the facility and you've seen that we have a large buying group that's buying devices and selling devices, and we literally get over 100 calls a day of people selling things, and so we have great data. Almost 4 or 5 times a day, we're now getting offered to buy things that are not FDA cleared, that should not be in the US, that are basically copying exactly the same name of a product it is. They'll say it's a GentleMax Pro, it's a Fotona Dynamis, or they'll change the name slightly. It's not a MedLite, L-I-T-E, it's a Med, L-I-G-H-T. And when we look at the pictures, we're like, this isn't even FDA cleared. But yet people are using them. They have no idea what the output is. They have no idea what the settings are. There's no service provider. So we know they're using these adulterated or non-FDA cleared devices. So that's a really big risk. So there's limited to no insurance out there. A lot of these devices are not FDA cleared, and nobody really knows what the origin is. And so I think it's important, kind of underline what you said, is the clinician is responsible and they're liable, and it's a big problem.
Yeah, definitely, because they'll have no one to go to if they buy this device. There's going to be no one protecting you. So there are lawsuits about laser burns and microneedling, scarring, whatever. When that happens, sometimes the initial demand you may get is like $1 million for one claim. If your insurance is not covering it and the manufacturer is not helping you, that's a life-ending thing, right? A career-ending thing. So, I would say buying these unapproved, non-FDA cleared devices is a terrible idea, because you may save some money, but it always catches up with you, always.
I'm going to share a story that was many years ago, but I think it'll kind of clarify what you and I are kind of talking about. This was an FDA cleared device, and it was a physician, and they were doing a procedure on a young person, and nothing significant, but there was a reaction to the anesthetic, and unfortunately she passed away. And it does happen. It had nothing to do with the device. It had nothing to do with the facility. It had nothing to do with the doctor. But here's what you're going to find interesting, is he didn't have a crash cart. And in that particular environment, you needed to have a crash cart, a defibrillator, and intubation. And interestingly, because of that, he was found liable. And there's several points here. One is he lost his license, okay, because he didn't have the proper recovery gear. And the second thing is the plaintiff's lawyers sued everyone. Everyone. It didn't matter the building owners, the physicians, the device manufacturer, the reseller. Everyone was litigated against. And so everyone had to have their own counsel. Everyone had misaligned incentives. Everyone had a different role. And is that something that you think is a significant issue?
Yeah, I think people are not prepared for emergencies in general. People don't have simple things like Hylenex. People don't take a basic laser safety course. People buy equipment off of I don't know where and then don't have any training. Whenever there's an investigation, one of the things they ask is, show us evidence of your training. And if you have nothing, like, I can't make it for you. You know, so I'm like, whoa, like, how are you doing this? You didn't have any training. Okay, like we'll do our best. But yeah, I think a lot of these things are preventable, but if they're not done ahead of time, they become very expensive.
I tell people on preventive maintenance that you should do it once a year. Always do preventive maintenance on any device, doesn't matter what it is. If you're touching it with a patient, you should do it. And they're like, well, God, Scott, it doesn't really need it. It's very stable. I've had it for years. I said, well, number one is you need to vacuum it out and get the dust out of it and clean the mirrors, whatever. That's going to make it run better, and it's going to stop from a major repair. But here's the real reason why. You need a get out of jail free card. You need something that shows that you were responsible in taking care of that you calibrated it, safety inspected it, took care of it once a year. So when something may have nothing to do with the laser itself or the energy-based device, you need something that says you took care of it. I have physicians now, we've been, as I shared with you, we started roughly 9 years ago, that have had things for 7 or 8 years, never done a PM.
Oh, no.
And if they have an adverse event, that plaintiff attorney is going to drive a bus through that. Like, you never took care of this device. There was a bad thing that happened. Are you really medically responsible? And do you think that's an issue that people should be addressed?
Definitely. Yeah, I think preventative maintenance is key. Doing like updated trainings on things is key. So once a year, you should really be updating your policies and procedures, your employee handbook, and doing maintenance on all of your devices. Because regulations change and things get old and things need to get cleaned, and you need to have evidence of you maintaining things and having continuing education. So yeah, once a year at the minimum, for sure.
So one of the things I've just taken away from this, which I didn't realize, is your clients are seeing 10 to 20% year-over-year growth, which is, you're right, is unbelievable. You don't really see that anywhere. Everybody can cite Google and all the, all the different companies that are like the Michael Jordans of business. But for the most part, companies may grow or not grow 1 to 2% year-over-year if you're successful. When you see 10 to 20% growth, that's just unheard of. And what I'm hearing you kind of outline is you should continue to make an investment in the underlying foundation of education, regulatory, preventive maintenance, SOPs, whatever it might be, because you're in such a high growth environment that you're really going to create a competitive advantage to continue that growth if you make those investments.
Definitely. And things are changing. This is such a rapidly evolving industry. So if you haven't updated your things or your devices for a year, they may be outdated. So also, I guess one of the other big issues that people face is staffing and staff turnover and staff happiness and culture. If your office never does continuing education training, preventative maintenance, like some of these basic things, your employees or your contractors, however you structure it, are gonna not be super happy with you and are gonna seek other opportunities. So one of the big other issues we see is staff turnover. And a lot of it has to do with, yes, people want to open up their own practices. But a lot of it also has to do with a lack of opportunities and trainings at your own practice. So, and that's true for me also, right? When people ask me, okay, well, what's the number one thing I can do to reduce staff turnover? My advice is look in the mirror and think about ways that you can do things differently yourself. Giving people some motivation, some opportunity for advancement, some CME opportunity, whatever. So I think that a lot of it has to do with, if you run your practice as if like you set up things 5 years ago and you're not going to do anything new, then your staff is going to feel bored and feel like you don't have anything new for them, and they're going to go open their own place or go work for your competitor.
It's interesting you say that, because it's something currently that I'm struggling with, because running a business is like spinning plates. Okay, you kind of get that plate going, and then you got to go get that plate going, and then you got to get that plate going.
And then your toilet isn't flushing, and then you got to go fix it. Yeah.
And so, to me, it's been building underlying infrastructure, and then customer experience, and then getting people hired to do different roles. And you're so kind of macro focused at all of these plates spinning, and then you're right, the toilet overflows, or the roof collapses, and you're trying to manage all this. But then you have a tendency to kind of forget about the group that helped get you there. And that's something that currently, as an organization, we're kind of realigning our focus now, because we have some of the big macro things kind of worked out. We know what kind of customer experience we want to have, and we have the underlying infrastructure and the capitalization. And now what we got to do is, okay, let's bring this core group together that kind of got us here. How do we create that culture? Because if you don't, people are going to leave. They're going to find other things to do. They have better things to do with their life. And so I think med spas really struggle with that, because there is tremendous amount of competition. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and I think that's really driving the turnover. And I'm guessing you're seeing that.
Yeah, definitely. And we see the ugly sides of that, where people start fighting over their non-compete agreements and their training reimbursement agreements, and their staff is reporting them to government agencies for being, uncompetitive and all these things. So yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard because as business owners, we are doing so many things at once, but we have to always take a step back and think, okay, look, our staff in the service business, it's so important where our staff they're the ones that make sure that our clients are happy. And if our staff is not happy, our clients are not going to be happy. And it's kind of like this whole, it feeds each other. So yeah, it's really hard. And it's hard. I can't fix somebody's culture with a contract. Mm-hmm. I can't fix my own culture with a contract. Like, how can I fix somebody else's? And I say that, I think about that myself. Like, my team, right? They have contracts, but they're lawyers, mm-hmm. So I have to go beyond that, right? I have to give them the best version of myself every day. And it's hard, because sometimes I just got off the phone with, some client who's dealing with like a very serious investigation, and I want to focus on that. But if I have an employee who needs me, I have to give that attention too. So I think it's really hard in this business, but clients come to med spas, most med spas today, not some of the bigger corporate ones, but the smaller ones, they come because of the provider. Mm-hmm. And so if you're crappy to your provider and they leave, no matter what the contract says, it could be the most ironclad thing, a lot of your clients will go follow the provider. So to prevent that, it's not by talking to your lawyer. It's by looking in the mirror and saying, like, okay, like, what can I do? Like, maybe I need to have like lunch on Fridays. Maybe I need to give them a 10% raise. And I know that's 10% out of my pocket. That's, painful. At the same time, giving them a 10% raise is cheaper than hiring the new person and spending $50,000 on a recruiter and lost revenue and, not being able to sleep at night for 2 months.
You and I could probably sit here and talk about how we could help each other with our own businesses versus giving guidance to the community on the things you're thinking of. But I agree with you. It's kind of flipping this upside down is we're so focused on the customer experience and all of the things that go with it as MRP or as a med spa or as a law firm, that we do have a tendency, as I shared, to kind of forget about the trailer that's behind us that's really driving all of that. And if I have a takeaway from this, which I usually do in these discussions, is it really amplifies what I'm already thinking, which is we really have to focus on that. And I think if we can just kind of flip this whole conversation around, probably the number one thing that med spas should be focusing on is really their employee base and their organization and the health of your organization, and making sure that that's operating right and functioning correctly. And then you'll be able to provide better experience all the way around.
Definitely. I think people say focus on the customer. And that's true. You have to understand your customer and speak their language. But I think you have to really focus on your own culture and what you're building and have the structure in place before you could really go out crazy and market and get lots of customers. So yeah, I think the issues of employment are really going to be top in the next 5-10 years because there's this big shortage, like you mentioned, and there's a change in regulations in many states where people have autonomous practice and can open up their own practices. So it's going to be harder and harder to retain employees. So they have to have your full investment in them, and then they have to have a track for, okay, like today I'm in customer service, or I'm the front desk person, but maybe there's an opportunity for you to pay for my esthetician school, or maybe I could be the office manager, whatever. Everyone has to have this path for the future. Like, yeah, they may be super excited when you talk about, oh, one day we're going to be bought by private equity, but what they're thinking is, what's in it for me? They don't care that you're going to be bought by private equity. They want to know what's in it for me. So yeah, stock option plans and just helping people realize that that the company that you're building, the med spa that you're building, is a place for growth for them, not for you. For them is, I think, the key to retention.
This has been such a pleasure. And as you were just kind of wrapping up, I was thinking about when we first met over Zoom the first time, or Google. I don't think it was long after COVID, or it was maybe right in the very tail end of it. It wasn't that long ago, but you were kind of out, promoting the book and getting some reach out there, and I was kind of just catching my stride. And it's just interesting to see how much you and I have changed. As I sit here and spend another hour with you, just everything about you has really been amplified. And
And you too.
I'm getting larger, I'm getting older. But God, it's just such a great thing to see your practice explode and your brand explode, and the impact you're having on med spas, and the patients that they're touching, and the safety and cultures that you're creating. And just congratulations. And it's great seeing you. And I'm really looking forward to next year when we get together again and kind of see where we're at and what we're up to. So thanks for coming. Yeah,
thank you. It's my pleasure. I mean, hopefully, besides more gray hair, I also have more experience and more happier clients. But it's been fun. It's been incredible, actually. I'm so grateful to have friends like you and be able to do this in person.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.